Who is going to lead this team in targets, Luka?
If you want me to just fire from the hip real quick, I believe that answer will be Dalton Kincaid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I even have noted here, and I think the conversation more kind of bleeds immediately into does it really matter? And that's where I would be very curious to know how people feel. But I feel like I've maintained this feeling about targets because you listen to all the pundits whenever the Bills come up. The biggest question naturally is, well, they have Josh Allen, but who's Josh Allen throwing to? Yada, yada, yada. And they talk about how they lost Diggs, they lost Davis, all this. And what I think happened that it doesn't necessarily get overlooked, but it just kind of gets partially forgotten is the transition away from the massive target based offense had already occurred last season in the second half, where we saw a philosophical change and there was a much more lean on inside the numbers offensively. You had your James Cook games happening. You had Dalton Kincaid getting used much more. Knox came back and he was still getting his fair share of targets. Shakir, who primarily was coming out of the slot, was also, of course, exploding. Things like that were happening where the perimeter no longer became that dependent place for Josh Allen to find Diggs whenever needed. It wasn't, hey, Diggs is down there somewhere, let me just find him in a pinch. That still happened occasionally. It happened, unfortunately, in one of the most crucial points of the season where Diggs just came up short, or his hands came up short. But overall, it's one of those things where I don't think targets ultimately matter. I think the offense we should, at least at this moment, be expecting should be something we saw, of course, in the second half of the season, when that's who's now running the show full time. And it's going to be a communal kind of target share. It's going to be game by game basis, I would imagine. Is it going to be a James Cook game? Is it going to be a Dalton Kincaid game? Is it going to be a Shakir game? Is it going to be a Keon / Mac Hollins / perimeter game? Is it Curtis Samuel going to get utilized? There's kind of a much more variety of weapon in this offense now than there has been in seasons past. And I think what that does is open up that avenue where you can get a little bit more opponent specific on how you'd like to attack things. And that's great. What that does, though, is it reduces the total targets to a one individual. And 1 week, it's going to make fantasy owners really, really upset, because ultimately what's going to happen is, unless you have Josh Allen, you can't guarantee anything for you on this Bills offense week in, week out. It could change drastically. Now, the ceilings of all of them in fantasy terms could still be very, very high. It's just your floors are now much lower due to that fact. And whereas Kincaid, let's call it, since I said he will most likely end the season with the most targets, because I think he'll be probably your next most consistent usage player in this offense. I'm not including James Cook in this conversation because we're talking targets, of course. He will also have his running back share, running the ball. But with the receivers, Kincaid's probably your most steady Eddie looking target. So week in, week out, yes, the game plan may change, but I still think your Kincaid targets are going to happen where you have 2, 3, 4 at least. And then there's going to be certain games where he will probably bleed into the 8, 9, maybe even approach double digits, depending on game plan, because we already saw that there's clear chemistry between him and Allen. We saw the highs and what was going on, especially when Knox was out last year. And when you sprinkle in on top of it that there is no longer that Diggs there and stuff of that, Allen's going to have to find that new guy he trusts. And it effectively becomes a fight between Shakir and Kincaid. And I would just think that it did feel like the offense is switching into something where in the box, in between the numbers, Kincaid getting utilized to find those pockets of space kind of in that second level there is going to be something that we're going to expect to see a little bit more often. So I'm just going to tip my hat to Kincaid. But the ultimate answer is I don't think it really matters anyways.
I think Kincaid's probably the easy answer. And I don't mean that as any kind of a knock on you. I think that's more of a, like you mentioned, there's a lot of uncertainty with the wide receivers. Like they drafted Keon Coleman high, but you and I can certainly think of a world where Keon Coleman isn't on the field as much as two other receivers, Curtis Samuel or Shakir. Maybe you want to plant your flag on Curtis Samuel, but you could see a world where maybe they did bring him in to just be a highly paid gadget guy. And his reality is much more of like that number 3 receiver that he has, by the way, traditionally been. in his career. I want to run a number real quick because I just stumbled into something while you were chatting. That is wild. Okay, I'm going to bring this up because I am going to plant my flag on Khalil Shakir. And I
Okay.
think it's tricky because of a lot of the stuff you mentioned. I do think there's going to be a concentrate effort to get Kincaid involved. And I don't want to not mention the running backs because last year, when you look at what happened after Joe Brady took over, the running backs paced for over 700 receiving yards combined. That was between James Cook and Ty Johnson and Latavius Murray. When you look at their numbers, what they accomplished in those 8 games under Joe Brady, if you extrapolate that over 17 games, the running backs would have accounted for 700 yards. There's going to be a lot of offense going through the running backs through the air. The reason why I'm planting my flag on Khalil Shakir is really threefold. One, he is the one that has familiarity with Josh Allen. I just came over a wild stat, Luka. Khalil Shakir had 45 targets last year and he caught 39 passes.
Yep.
That means only 6 balls that were intended for Khalil Shakir didn't wind up in his hands. That's not catchable passes. That's not drops. That's
Anything.
Josh Allen throws the ball in his direction and it's a catch. If you want a comparison's sake, Stephon Diggs had 107 targets, or I'm sorry, 160 targets, 107 catches.
Yeah.
Khalil Shakir converted 86% of his targets into catches. Stephon Diggs was 66. 86% is tremendous. Smaller sample size. That's hard to keep up with, but that says something about the rapport between Josh Allen and Khalil Shakir. When you go back to after Joe Brady took over, Stephon Diggs' usage went way down. Khalil Shakir's usage went way up. Khalil Shakir was only on the field for 24 snaps per game under Ken Dorsey. Under Joe Brady, that got bumped up to 51 snaps per game. I also think, even though Shakir was a primary slot receiver last season, he ran nearly 30% of his snaps on the boundary under Joe Brady after being right around 25 under Ken Dorsey. I feel really good about the fact that Khalil Shakir is going to be a high volume player for this team. I think he can win short. I think he has Josh Allen's trust. He's the only guy on this team with familiarity with the quarterback. And if I had to pick a receiver today that I felt most comfortable would go over 1,000 yards, I'd plant my flag on Khalil Shakir, Luka.
That's absolutely fair. The conversion ratio of target to catch for Khalil Shakir has always been there. As you mentioned, the key kind of asterisk is sample size. It's been pretty small for him overall. Not to his discredit, it's just, that's just the way it is. And I'm pretty sure even with that, what was it, 45 you said? No, yeah, 45 targets.
39 to 45.
Yeah. So even with that, I bet you if you did it game breakdown, it was a vast majority in the second half of last year when we saw that transition happen. And Shakir is, I think right now, when you look at it, at the receiver position, the true explosive player as of this moment, where he should be able to provide you a vast array of ways he can kind of blow up. It's not one simple way. It's like Curtis Samuel is open field, get him going. Once he hits that second gear, he's hard to tackle. I don't think he's bad in the sense of he can't do other things once in a while, but it's not like I'm expecting him to shrug off a tackle or anything. Shakir, we've seen do that. Shakir, we've seen, make the spectacular catch, land his 2 feet and turn and go as well. We've seen him do it a multitude of ways that I'm comfortable thinking that he's probably your downfield most explosive threat you will have game in, game out. And it's like when you combine that with the steady Eddie feel of Kincaid, who can still make big plays happen, but of course he is just still Kincaid. So I'm not going to sit here and say, he's Tyreek Hill at tight end kind of deal. And then you have James Cook in the backfield, who is of course as explosive as possible coming out of there. Those 3 phases are a great place to be. And then we're having this discussion about targets. Yeah, I don't see how it's hard to believe that Shakir wouldn't be that guy. There could be a world where we see Shakir even get more looks on the perimeter based on whatever personnel packages it is, whatever they're trying to achieve that week. If they see a mismatch, that Shakir could be the guy to exploit because maybe they have just a bigger kind of stronger corner outside that, yes, your Keon Coleman could, maybe out physical, but he's not going to get behind him. Whereas a Shakir could, whatever that might be. So I do like that take, and there's now 2 seasons of rapport between him and Allen where, of course, and you hear a lot of the quotes come out once in a while, that Allen has high praise for Shakir. Brandon Beane, of course, absolutely loves him. McDermott has praise for Shakir. And you even see these silly over the top posts and stuff where it's like, is Shakir the next elite receiver? And it's like, okay, let's tone it down a notch. I know what you're doing over there, social media. I get it. But overall, there's a reason that even outlandish kind of post comes. And it's because it's someone trying to blow up these quotes and these things that you clearly see that are there, and those are factual, that they do believe in this guy, and it could absolutely happen the way you're saying it.
Yeah, let's walk before we run, people. Let's let Khalil Shakir become a very good starting receiver for this
crazy
team
thought.
first.
Let's let him get 90 plus catches first.
I mean,
crazy thought.
Thanks for watching this clip from Bill's chat. For the full episode, you can find the link in the description. While you're here, we would love it if you took the time to like and subscribe. That way you'll never miss when we upload new content to Bill's chat on YouTube.